As a matter of fact, Daniel Webster, in comparing American Christianity with European Christianity, he said, fortunately, he said, American Christianity is Christianity to which the sword and the burning stake are unknown. It's general, tolerant Christianity that's the law in America. So we don't use burning at the stake. We don't put you to the sword if you don't believe right. American Christianity is not like that. Other founding fathers said the same thing. John Jay, founding father, Supreme Court Chief Justice, the original one, said American Christianity was enlightened when compared to European Christianity. John Adams called American Christianity rational when compared to European Christianity. And John Quincy Adams called American Christianity civilized as compared to the rest of the world. John Adams, John Quincy Adams, John Jay, Webster, all these guys said that. And as a matter of fact, maybe the best summation is given by Thomas Jefferson. This is what Thomas Jefferson said. He said the comparisons of our government with those in Europe is like a comparison between heaven and hell. I mean, it's that stark. That was the difference. So Article 11 of the Treaty of Tripoli says the government of the United States is in no sense founded on the Christian religions, as it has no character of hatred against the laws, religion, and tranquility of Muslims. We're not those kind of Christians. So when you hear the Treaty of Tripoli invoked, and secularists love to do that, and I've noticed that recently they've been sending letters to the editors across the nation. It's like an evangelistic campaign they've got, and they keep quoting Article 11 in the Treaty of Tripoli, and most Christians don't know what to say about that or what to do about that, and the thing to do is, hey guys, quit stopping the sentence midway. Read the rest of it. It says, you guys are Muslims, we're Christians, and the fact we're Christians doesn't mean we hate you just because you're Muslims. That's what Article 11 says. So, back to General Eaton. He's over, he's leading the American forces through, and in his day-to-day records and his memoirs, it's really kind of humorous to see what he says. For example, here's an entry from April the 8th. He says, and now remember, he's been a diplomat over there already. Now he's coming back militarily. He says, we find it almost impossible to inspire these wild bigots with confidence in us, or to persuade them that, being Christians, we can be otherwise than enemies to Muslims. We have a difficult undertaking. In other words, we keep telling these guys that, look, just because we're Christians, we don't hate you. But they won't believe that. They keep saying, no, we're Muslims, you're Christians, we have to fight you. And again, that's what the Treaty of Tripoli was about. And that's not the only treaty. There were treaties done with Algiers and with Tunis and with all these other Islamic nations as well. And that was a common clause in it. So that Treaty of Tripoli is completely out of context. But again, here's what Eaton said, is we keep trying to tell them that we're Christians, you're Muslims, and we're not your enemies. But by the time we go from April the 8th, when he wrote that, to May the 23rd, it's like, all right, I'm tired of negotiating. And this is what he says on May the 23rd. The commander-in-chief of the enemy's forces has offered for my head $6,000, which is a bunch of bucks back then, has offered for my head $6,000 and double the sum for me a prisoner, and $30 per head for Christians. Why don't he come and take it? That's a great military attitude. All right, he's put a bounty on every one of them. Let's see if he can collect. Come on, let's see if you can collect your bounty on us. So here the Muslims have put a bounty on the head of every Christian. By the way, they still pay bounties today. The last I knew over in the war on terror, those who are willing to sacrifice themselves in car bombs or walk into a restaurant and blow themselves up are getting paid about $25,000. That's what their family gets if they blow themselves up. So there's still a bounty. They still pay for that kind of slaughter and death. Nothing new under the sun. But as it turns out, we had, in that first conflict, we had 5 years of on-the-ground warfare in that region of the world, right where we are now, and finally we're able to get a first kind of peace treaty signed with Tripoli and some others, and they said, okay, we give up, we're tired of being thumped by the Marines, you can send them back home, we'll be good now. But when you look at Thomas Jefferson had been sent as a diplomat to negotiate with these guys in 1784. And here he is in 1805 finally getting the first peace treaty with them where we no longer have to pay. So you're looking at 21, 22 years that Thomas Jefferson has been negotiating with Muslim terrorists and fighting Muslim terrorists. Now, you may have noticed that back in January of 2007, Keith Ellison was sworn into the U.S. Congress from the 5th Congressional District of Minnesota. And when he was sworn in, he took his oath of office on the 1746 Koran owned by Thomas Jefferson. Now, he was called by the media the first Muslim member of the American Congress, and he's sworn in on Jefferson's Koran. You know, why in the heck would Jefferson own a Koran? What's he doing with that? Well, the answer is very simple, and it comes from a principle of war given by the Chinese general 2,000 years ago, Sun Tzu, who said, quote, know your enemy. So in 1786, when Jefferson had asked the question of the Muslim diplomat and said, why do you guys fight us? Well, why these unprovoked attacks on us? And that diplomat said, well, it's written in the Quran. Jefferson said, you got to be kidding. There's actually a book that says that you go to heaven if you kill people? So Jefferson went out and got a Quran to read for himself. He didn't want to trust what somebody else said. He wants to know for himself. So Jefferson got that Quran. He read that Quran in order to learn the mind and the thinking of his enemy, in order to learn how they thought. And so he used that, trying to learn how they thought in his diplomatic proceedings, and finally when he went to war with them. So interestingly, Ellison, when he was sworn in back in 2007 on Jefferson's Quran, says, the fact that this was Jefferson's Quran shows the positive influence that Islam has had on the Founding Fathers. Wrong. The reason he had the Quran was to learn how to fight the folks who were attacking him, who were Muslim terrorists. So that was a piece of revision that happened. And by the way, another piece of revision was the media said, this is the first Muslim sworn into Congress. Well, you need to go back to 1799. John Randolph of Roanoke. John Randolph of Roanoke, who served under all these early presidents, he served under Adams and Jefferson and Madison and Monroe and John Quincy Adams and Jackson, etc. Long-term member of Congress. John Randolph of Roanoke, who, by the way, is a descendant of Pocahontas, this is his quote. He said that he held a position, quote, in favor of Mohammedism. In other words, I'm a big supporter of Islam. He said he quote, rejoiced in all of its triumphs over the cross of Christianity. Whenever Islam thumped Christianity, he was standing and cheering. He said that he held a position of, quote, natural repugnance to Christianity. So here's John Randolph saying, look, I hate Christianity. I love Islam, and I love it when Islam thumps Christianity. It sounds to me like that might have been our first Muslim member of Congress. This is in 1799. Oh, by the way, he didn't stay a Muslim member of Congress. You may have heard of Francis Scott Key, the guy who did the Star-Spangled Banner. Francis Scott Key led John Randolph of Roanoke to Christ, converted him to Christianity. John Randolph became a strong advocate of Christianity, and I guess if people are worried about a Muslim in Congress today, that's the right tack to take, is conversion. And that's what John Randolph of Roanoke experienced through the witnessing of Francis Scott Key. So going back to Jefferson, Jefferson brings some peace to America from these terrorist attacks. And the next president comes in is James Madison. Now, Madison immediately gets engulfed with the War of 1812. He's having to defend America from what's called the Second American Revolution, but the British are attacking America again. And so that war goes for several years. And don't ever think that enemies overseas don't watch what's happening domestically in America. Because when Madison went to war against the British, and the Navy is now tied up against the British Navy, all these Muslim terrorists overseas said, oh, look, they're busy. They can't do anything to us now. And so they started renewing all the same attacks that they had been doing a decade before, now knowing that the American military can do nothing to them. So we signed the peace treaty to end the War of 1812 in 1815, and as soon as Madison signs the peace treaty to end the war with the British, he immediately dispatches the American Navy back over to that same region of the world to deal with these Muslim terrorists. And so leading the expedition that time, you have two leaders. It's another two-prong attack. You have Commodore William Bainbridge, and you also have Commodore Stephen Decatur. Now, Stephen Decatur, who's the leader of the stuff that Madison sent over, Stephen Decatur had been a young naval lieutenant back when Thomas Jefferson sent him the first time in the War on Terror. So Decatur really showed himself as a great warrior at that point. Now he's being sent back 10 years later because he knows the turf, he knows the enemy, he's going back. And so Madison sent him back, and so for the next 2 years, it is brutal hand-to-hand combat with these terrorists. It's a lot like the urban kind of stuff that our guys have been having to do in cleaning out Baghdad and cleaning out Mosul and all these other places where that it's really this hard hand-to-hand close quarters combat. That's the way it was back then as well. There are very famous pictures of Stephen Decatur engaged in hand-to-hand conflict with these Muslim terrorists. And so after 2 years of just, again, thumping these guys, they say, okay, we give up America. We'll be nice. Please don't send your Navy back over anymore. Don't send the Marines back. We don't want to see them. We'll be nice. And so that brought to a conclusion that first war on terror. And it was Muslim terrorists. It was 32 years of conflict. It was 7 years of armed warfare on the ground in the same region where we are now under 4 different military commanders. It was not a small thing. We never hear about that in our history books. But, you know, if you say, now, why did they fight Americans back then? What was the cause? You recall that the diplomat told Adams and Jefferson, he says, we do this because it's founded on the laws of our prophet Muhammad. It's written in our Quran that all nations who should not acknowledge our authority are sinners, and it's our right and duty to make war upon them wherever they can be found, and every Muslim who's slain in battle is sure to go to paradise. Now, this is part of the theological belief, is that if you get killed in a holy war, you're going right to heaven. See, that one of the problems with Islam as far as going to heaven is you don't know if you're going to get there till after you die. You die, when you get there, the angels weigh up your good works, they weigh up your bad works, and if the good works outweigh the bad works, then you get to make heaven, but you won't know that till after you get there and those works are weighed. Now, if you want a guaranteed express ticket to heaven, what you got to do is get yourself killed in a holy war. And that's why the imams are so rapid to call for jihads. Because once they declared a holy war, now if you get yourself killed, you're straight into heaven. That's your straight ticket in. What can be better than going to heaven? And guaranteed way to get there is to be killed in a war, a holy war, a war against Christians. So that's what was happening back then. That's still what is happening now. And, by the way, another early Secretary of State was Timothy Pickering. He served under John Adams and George Washington. And if you look at the diplomatic correspondence to the State Department when he's Secretary of State, I thought one of the really compelling statements was this, and this was one of the statements that was sent in by one of the diplomats. He said, quote, taught by revelation that war with the Christians will guarantee the salvation of their souls, the Muslims' inducements to desperate fighting are very powerful. In other words, since they're taught in their holy book that if you war with a Christian and you get killed, that's a straight ticket to heaven. Man, that's a great inducement for them to fight very viciously, because that's a way to heaven. You're not going to talk them out of fighting. It's like trying to talk them out of their salvation.